And as we talked about earlier, the cranes represent long life. They represent immortality. And it's my belief that what they're talking about is not the immortality of any of these characters. They're not even really talking about the immortality of North Korea or South Korea. They're talking about the immortality of the Korean spirit.
몇십 년 전만 해도 외국인들의 한국을 향한 시선은 약소국을 바라보는 측은함이었을 것입니다. 하지만 전쟁으로 황폐화된 아픔을 딛고 한강의 기적을 거쳐 강대국으로 발돋움한 한국은 현재와 과거와 비교해봤을 때 확연히 차이가 날 정도로 엄청난 성장을 이룬 국가입니다. 지금이야 전 세계적으로 뻗어나가고 있는 한국이지만 몇십 년 전만 해도 한국은 세계에서 가장 피폐한 국가 중 하나였습니다. 약 35년간의 일제강점기와 3년간의 전쟁을 통해 한국인의 정신이 끊길 위험에 처한 와중에도 여러 예술인들은 문학을 통해 한국인의 정신이 끊어지지 않고 계승될 수 있도록 노력했는데요. 그중 하나인 황순원의 학이란 작품을 통해 한국인의 정신과 유교 사상, 더 나아가 한국의 아픈 역사를 학생들에게 가르친 외국인 교사가 있습니다. 문학의 힘을 빌려 한 민족을 하나로 뭉치게 하고 그 얼과 정신을 유지하려는 움직임은 끊임없이 반복되었습니다. 황순원은 한국 현대 문학을 대표하는 소설가로 평가받으며 소나기와 같이 기라성 같은 작품들을 탄생시켰는데요. 그 중에서도 6.25 전쟁을 배경으로 하는 소설학은 순수한 우정을 통해 이념의 갈등을 극복하고자 하는 내용을 담고 있습니다. 이러한 사실을 알게 된 앨런 프리슨이라는 한 캐나다의 국어 교사는 한국 문학을 통해 학생들에게 한국을 설명하는 시간을 가졌습니다.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Korean Literature Weekly. I'm your host, Mr. Alan Friesen.
Big time!
Today we're going to be talking about the short story Cranes, or A Crane, by Hwang Sun-won. We're going to be looking at some of the important features of it. I'm not going to be going over the entire story in detail, but pulling out various threads that we can examine, like a string of yarn that one might use as a belt. Okay.
LOL.
Let's talk about, first of all, the central figure or the central metaphor in this story, which is the crane. In Korean culture, the crane represents immortality and long life. It was believed that the nobles in Korea, back in the Joseon dynasty, if you died, you came back as a crane. They're very noble, very beautiful creatures. It's rumored that they lived 1,600 years. So, we've got these cranes that are present not just in the title, but also throughout the middle and at the very end of the story. And we've got two main characters here, Sang-sam and Tok-che. Sang-sam and Tok-che. So the story begins with the sentence, this village to the north of the 38th parallel demarcation line.
학은 남한 측의 성삼과 북한 측의 덕재라는 두 친구가 이념의 차이를 초월한 우정을 보여주는 이야기로 순수한 우정과 인간성의 회복을 주제로 하여 삶이 피폐해져만 가던 한국인들에게 희망을 주고자 했는데요. 전쟁이 터지자 피난을 가려 했지만 고향을 버리고 갈 수 없다던 아버지의 말을 따른 덕재와 그와 반대로 아버지와 아내를 버리고 피난길에 오른 성삼은 서로 대비되는 모습을 보여주고 있습니다. 그는 작품 기저에 깔린 배경 지식인 유교 사상에 집중하여 설명을 이어나갔습니다.
So whereas Tok-che stayed behind in order to look after his father and risked capture at the hands of the Southerners, the North Korean government said that they would be killed. He stayed behind because he was a dutiful son. But Sang-sam, early in the war, had escaped and had gone south and had sought his fortune. And by doing so, he proved himself to be an unloyal son. He proved himself to be outside of this order of Confucianism we talked about earlier. He left his wife and his father behind and only cared about himself. This inverts the moral structure. And at the very end of the story, Sang-sam, the southerner, says, let's go crane hunting. He's referring to the time when they were both children and they had secretly captured a crane. And then they had let it go shortly before it had been shot. So he's saying, let's go crane hunting. Why don't you, hurry up and send some cranes over. Why don't you go run over there and see if you can get some cranes to fly out from the ground. He's not telling him to go hunt cranes. He's saying, okay, you know what? This is your chance. Why don't you go run? Why don't you escape? So at the very end of the story, we have this person who is a rebel, who betrays his father, betrays his bride. He decides that he can no longer do this to his best friend, and he lets his best friend escape. At that point, just then, a few red-crowned cranes were slowly flying with outstretched wings across the high blue autumn sky. And as we talked about earlier, the cranes represent long life. They represent immortality. And it's my belief that what they're talking about is not the immortality of any of these characters. They're not even really talking about the immortality of North Korea or South Korea. They're talking about the immortality of the Korean spirit. Song Sam realizes that he's made a mistake by breaking these established rules of Korean society. Not North Korean society, not South Korean society, but the essence of Koreanness. He has broken it. And he's trying to mend it by allowing his friend to escape, instead of being taken back south, tortured and possibly killed by the South Korean government. And because he does this, we have the author creating this flock of cranes that fly overhead as a very powerful symbol that despite what might happen between the North Koreans and the South Koreans, this Korean spirit must live on. And that's it. That's the story.
Nicely done.
I am, however, going to be talking about Confucianism and several key aspects within it. There are several key tenets in Confucianism. There's no real codified law or list of rules, but there are a series of precepts or guidelines for a Confucius gentleman to follow. Those include the distinction between law and ritual, relationships between family members and strangers, filial piety, loyalty, how outsiders are treated, and how women are treated. So in a country that's ruled by penal law, external authorities give out punishments after the crime takes place, such as ours. If you commit a crime here in Canada, such as stealing something, the police will come after you later. This is how the penal code in our country works. In the system of Confucianism, it works a little bit differently. Instead of you do something wrong and then the cops come after and punish you later, in Confucianism it's expected that you've internalized the rules and laws of the country. And you avoid being a criminal. You act as you should be at all times.
다른 뛰어난 한국 작품 역시 해외로 널리 알려지길 바라며 영상 마치겠습니다. 이번 영상은 여기까지입니다. 구독과 좋아요, 알람 설정 부탁드립니다. 앞으로 더 좋은 영상으로 찾아뵙도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.